Hello everyone, welcome back to Ansarkari. So in the previous video, we were discussing about the Keynes aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. So today we'll be continuing further with again a different form, but we can say the goal remains similar, that we are determining equilibrium, income and employment in the economy. So this is known as the Hicks Hansen model, and or we can call it to be ISLM model. So IS here stands for the investment and savings, and it is representing the goods market in the economy. L stands for the liquidity preference, and M is for the quantity of money. So this is representing the money market. So we are going to discuss the relationship between these two markets, how they are interdependent and how they're determining the equilibrium. So when it comes to the link between these two markets, we have only one-way relationship where we see that money market influences the goods market. How that happens, what is the process behind this? So in this case, let's say again money market, so the tool or the instrument or the variable that is changing is the rate of interest. So rate of interest change can happen because of two further or sub factors which impacts the rate of interest, which is firstly the money supply in the economy and secondly the money demand. So changes in the rate of interest will be impacting the national income. National income is changing, it means the employment will also be affected by the changes in the rate of interest in the goods market. Whenever we are talking about changes in investment, savings, employment, income, that is always happening in the goods market. So goods market, how that is impacted, because directly we see changes in the investment level in the economy because of changes in the rate of interest. But this reverse implication is not true. So that is why there is only one way linkage or unilateral linkage, we can say. So we'll pick up individual markets first. So we'll take the goods market, which is represented by IS curve. So these are two curves, ISLM curves. And IS curve is showcasing the relationship between the rate of interest in the economy, the changes, and the national income, or you can say the GDP, how that is changing. So the relationship is depicted between these two variables by the IS curve, particularly in the goods market. When it comes to writing the equatorial representation, so aggregate demand is equal to consumption expenditure, consumption demand, and the investment demand in the economy. And in the Keynes model, we take investment to be endogenous, which is again determined by the rate of interest. So when it comes to the derivation of IS curve, how can we derive this? So this is one graph which is representing rate of interest and the level of investment. So the curve is downward sloping, which means there is inverse relationship between these two variables, as in, like, if this is the rate of interest initially, investment is I naught. If rate of interest declines, the investment will increase because the cost of borrowing reduces. So that's how we are depicting this relationship. So this is one. Then the similar diagram itself, this we can say this diagram is similar to that we studied and understood under the ADAS model. So this is the income line, OZ line, where we have aggregate demand, and the national income. We will draw the aggregate demand curve now, which is C plus I. Now here we saw that rate of interest, it fell down and investment increased. So when investment increases, the aggregate demand curve will shift up. Let's say, so the point of intersection also moves towards the right, and you can see equilibrium income has also increased with the increase in aggregate demand. So if we were at E1 by Y1, and this graph will showcase the derivation of the IS curve. So since rate of interest is here, so we have seen rate of interest relationship that we have seen that it is declining. So let's say we extrapolate this point here. One is this level of rate of interest, which is R naught depicted here, and the Y level of national income. Another point that we can take up here is this will be extrapolated down. So rate of interest has declined here from R0 to R1. So that is why this point will be below the preceding point. So R1, and here you can see that we are just extrapolating it here because the national income has increased. So when we join these 2 points, this is the downward sloping IS curve representing all the locus of points in the goods market. So this is the derivation. So simply we can say that when rate of interest fall, investment increases, which increases the aggregate demand in the economy, and that leads to ultimate increase in the national income. When it comes to the slope of the IS curve, what are the factors and how it is affected? So the first is elasticity of investment demand curve to, again, changes in rate of interest, because investment and rate of interest relationship is the most common that we study and understand. So when we say that, let's say the relationship is more of elastic in nature, which means a small change in the rate of interest will have huge impact on the scale or the level of investment in the economy. So the shape of investment curve will be perfectly elastic. So that is parallel to the x-axis. And the second factor that impacts the slope of IS curve is the size of investment multiplier. This we have studied before, the concept of multiplier. So investment multiplier will be written down as change in the income level due to change in the investment. So the formula is 1 upon 1 minus B. B here is the marginal propensity to consume. So if we see that if higher is B, that is marginal propensity to consume is high, which can be possible because of increase in income of the households. So if B is at a higher level, we will see aggregate demand curve will be more steep, because B is directly the slope of the AD curve. So it becomes more steep, higher is the value of B, and flatter would be the IS curve. Flatter curve means it is more elastic, more inclined towards elastic nature. Now, another thing would be, what are the factors which impacts the shift in the IS curve? So we can say it shifts due to change in the factors that we assume to be constant. So let's say if there are changes in the autonomous variables, which we saw in the aggregate demand equation. So that was, again, autonomous investment can change government expenditure or the consumption expenditure that can change. So autonomous means independent of the level of income of the economy or the household levels. So if we see that there is increase in government spending or the government expenditure in the economy, this can also be taken down as expansionary fiscal policy being followed by the government. So what are going to be what is going to be the direction of shift in the IS curve? If we are at, this is our initial position. Now government expenditure is increasing, so it will lead to increase in aggregate demand, and that would obviously shift the IS curve towards right. Or we can say this is also known as the upward shift of the IS curve. And since only government expenditure is increasing, there's no change in investment. So the rate of interest remains same. And you can see the impact that is causing on the GDP. So GDP expansion happens when there is increase in the government expenditure, and this size of the shift can be calculated by change in government expenditure upon, again, we multiply with the government expenditure multiplier. So the formula for, again, investment multiplier, government expenditure multiplier is same. Now we come to the money market, which is represented by LM curve. So in this case, again, here when we are talking about the demand for money, so it can be for two purposes that we are going to study. One is going to be for the transactions motive, to fulfill these motives, and another is for the speculative motives. And we can write it down as money demand is a combination of the money demand for transactions motive and money demand for speculative motive. And we can also write this to be in the equation form. Money demand is a function. So money demand can be impacted by what all variables? One would be the level of income. If your income is increasing, your money demand would increase, and again, the rate of interest would impact your money demand. So if your income is increasing, money demand curve will be shifting up or towards the right without any change in money supply. And when money demand increases, the rate of interest will increase. So that is one of the implications also. So in this case, rate of interest and the level of, so this would be for quantity of money in the economy. So money supply remains fixed. It is at again at a particular level. It is again a stock variable in the economy. That is why we are drawing perfectly inelastic money supply curve. Money demand curve is again the downward sloping. So money demand curve. This is the initial demand curve. This is again the equilibrium point, the intersection point, and this is the initial rate of interest. So when money demand, let's say it increases, so money demand curve will shift towards right, or it will shift up to the new position. You can say because money supply remains same. There is no change in the position of the money supply curve here also. It is at its original position. Only money demand is increasing. So that is why rate of interest will increase and the cost of borrowing will be increasing. So how do we represent the LM curve? The variables remain the same that we were mentioning during the IS curve. So relationship is between again the same variables. It is just the nature of market that is changing. So in this case, rate of interest we have seen, we have taken the case of increase in the rate of interest. Let's say this is the initial point, which is being represented E in this A panel. So this is the rate of interest that we are extending here, R, and let's say this is the level of income in the economy. Now, when the rate of interest is increasing, let's say we have moved to a higher level, which is R dash. So this point, we are going to see direct relationship between the rate of interest and the level of income. So we join these 2 points, we get the LM curve in the economy. Now here also we will look into the slope and factors causing shift in the LM curve. So when it comes to slope, first is again, it is elasticity, which is, we can say, the prime factor which impacts the slope or the steepness of a curve. So elasticity of hair money demand to income, we will see. So if income is changing, what is going to be the impact on the money demand in the economy? Second factor is elasticity of money demand to changes in rate of interest. Here it was income, here we are taking rate of interest. So in this case, if let's say the rate of interest is lower in the economy, so the LM curve is going to be more steep. Low rate of interest, more steep will be the LM curve. Factors impacting the position of LM curve or causing a shift when the money supply is increasing or there are changes in the money supply. Second would be the liquidity changes, liquidity preference, which is also depicting the money demand in the economy. So when this has certain change, for example, if the money demand increases in the economy, we have seen rate of interest will go up, and this will cause a left shift in the LM curve. So when we're talking about a left shift in the LM curve, or talking about this position. And third factor would be when the money demand falls, but money stock is same, or you can say money supply is same. There's no change. So in this case, LM shifts down, or right. Now, when we talk about simultaneous equilibrium between both the markets, we've discussed good market and the money market individually. So when it comes to determining equilibrium, we'll draw both the curves together, downward sloping IS curve, upward sloping LM curve. This is the equilibrium level that we get. Now, there can be, again, we can study what are going to be the changes because of certain policy changes or factors which together are impacting both these markets in the economy. So one case, we can say that if, let's say, RBI, it increases the money supply in the economy, how this graph is going to change and what are going to be the implications. So we draw the initial curves. This is the initial position at point E where we have equilibrium. So when money supply is increased, we are going to see a change in the position of LM curve because money supply is related to changes in money market and LM curve represents the money market. So if money supply is increasing, LM curve will be shifting down. So LM dash is the new curve. You can see money supply increases often when we are discussing about the monetary policy also. We say that rate of interest declines in the economy. So here also we are seeing the same impact because of increase in money supply. And because again, money supply is increasing, liquidity increases, the same we can say the pro-cyclical nature in the economy. It supports the economic growth. So that results into expansion in the national income or the national output in the economy. So there can be again several variables which can impact this one. We have discussed in detail the increase in money supply. Similarly, we can go ahead with changes in the investment expenditure or the government expenditure. Now, in that case, we will see shift in the IS curve because investment and government expenditure are related to the goods market in the economy. Now, when we come to critique of this model, of the ISLM model particularly. So when we see that it is based on the assumption that rate of interest that is being decided in this type of model that is free to vary and it is not being fixed by RBI. But again, that is completely opposite of what we see in the real life and the practical life. So rate of interest vary freely and not decided by RBI is one critique. Then we take investment. There is interest elastic. Now, what if we see that in real life that investment is becoming more inelastic to the changes in the rate of interest? So this model will collapse. in that case. Thirdly, we can say Milton Friedman, who belongs to the monetary school of economy. He said that the model is too simplified in nature, and it is ignoring the changes in the commodity prices or the prices simply. So price changes or you can say inflation is not taken into consideration by this model. So this is a critique. Now, when we can also discuss a little about the policies, particularly fiscal policy and the effectiveness, and similarly for the monetary policy. So when it comes to the role of fiscal policy, and we study the implications on the ISLM model or the way of function of the economy as per this model. If we see, take an example of the expansionary fiscal policy here, which means the government expenditure will be increased, or we can say tax the tax rates, they are reduced. But here we are going to look into increase in the government expenditure. So we always draw the graph and make changes as per the sequence. So we see increase in government expenditure. So here we will see changes in the position of IS curve because this impacts the goods market. So this is the major thing that is to be kept in mind here. So IS curve, because expenditure is increasing, so IS curve will shift up to a new position. So this is E. This was initial rate of interest. This is K position. And this is B. So you will see that we should have, if again the rate of interest would have been completely inelastic, this should have been the scale or the size of increase in the government or the economic growth or increase in GDP. But in actual sense, we see because of government expenditure increase, the GDP is increasing by only this much level. So what about this portion? Why we are not seeing it being transmitted into increase in real income or the real GDP of the economy? So this is known as the crowding out effect. This portion is being crowded out because of increase in government expenditure, which is leading to increase in the rate of interest. So because rate of interest increases, that will reduce the private sector investment, and because of that reduction in the private sector investment, we are only limited up to point B, and the GDP grows up till point Y double dash. So this is, you can say, the policy impact. Now we can take up again the effectiveness of monetary policy. So in case of monetary policy, let's say if we are in a situation of recession. So what is the likely policy change that should happen, the ideal policy change? Money supply should be increased in the economy so that again liquidity increases, there is more money in the hands of the people and they would be spending it, they would be demanding different goods and services, which will increase aggregate demand, which will increase the production, and that it will have positive spillover effects in terms of increase in job and employment and income in the economy, and this unending cycle will keep on functioning. So that is why we see increase in money supply. So because money supply, it is related to money market, we will see shift in LM curve position. So IS curve, LM curve, this is point E, money supply increases, LM curve will shift right, and we are at point P. So because of money supply increase, rate of interest declines, output will expand. That is what we want to come out of recession. So that's how we can say the even monetary transmission happens. The transmission mechanism that is again often referred in the context of the monetary policy in, like, let's suppose the RBI reduces the repo rate, and how much time does it take to actualize that change in terms of the interest rate that is being charged by the banks. So that's another thing that we can discuss here. In the end, we can just now take up integrating both the markets, ISLM markets. So here we will be drawing 4 panels to showcase in detail. This one will be for panel A to showcase employment in the economy. So N represents here the employment. Production function is drawn like this, which is written in the form of that output is a function of labor, state of technology, and capital in the economy. Technology and capital are assumed to be constant. So this is the output. We have, say, ON is the level of employment in the economy. You can Y naught or N naught initial positions. So panel B would represent goods market. This is similar to ADAS model. Origin OZ is the income line. We draw aggregate demand curves, which is C consumption and investment expenditure. So firstly, we are just drawing the initial positions. Then in panel C, it represents money market. Is a money market, we will be drawing money demand and money supply curve. So downward sloping demand curve, which we were referring to as liquidity preference in the economy. Money supply remains fixed. So this is the initial position. Rate of interest would be depicted here. Here we have quantity of money. This is R. This is, let's say, M naught is the initial level of money supply, and panel D would represent investment. For investment, we have investment here and rate of interest on y-axis. So investment, we see there is inverse relationship between. So we are going to extrapolate this level of rate of interest. So now if we assume that money supply is increasing in the economy, so how these positions would be changing? So we'll start from money market. Money supply increases, the money supply curve will shift towards right. We will see a fall in the rate of interest. When rate of interest falls, here in this panel D, we will see if rate of interest is falling to this level, investment increases in the economy. If investment is increasing, here we will see in terms of aggregate demand curve, this will shift up to a new position because of increase in the investment expenditure, and the total output in the economy will also expand. So when this output is expanding, here in the production function also we will represent the expansion in the output, and that is possibly leading to more employment in the economy. So that is how we can just study the relationship between these two markets together simultaneously, how the changes possibly they happen because of, you can say, policy changes in the economy, or because of any unforeseen consequences of something, or any variable out of these changes. So that's all related to the ISLM model of the Keynesian School of Economics.